The movie opens with a harrowing and unsettling scene set in a haunted house. The atmosphere is thick with dread, amplified by the sinister, echoing voice of a demon. The focus shifts to a man frantically trying to escape the unseen, malevolent presence within the house. His face is a ghastly sight, marred with severe burns and blood, a testament to the horror he's faced. In his final moments, as he collapses to the floor, the camera lingers on a mysterious book and a jar near him, their significance shrouded in mystery. The scene then transitions to a more serene setting, introducing us to Samita, a young girl of Indian origin living abroad with her parents. The family is busy preparing for a religious ceremony to be held at their home that evening. As Samita gets ready to leave for school, her mother, Purna, gently reminds her to return home early to assist with the arrangements and the cooking. Samita, apologetic, explains that she can't make it back early due to other plans. Her father, Inesh, who has just come off a night shift, joins the conversation, bidding farewell to Samita as she heads to school. At school, Samita's friend, Russ, invites her to spend the evening with him. She politely declines, citing the possibility of having to return home early for the worship. Curious, Russ inquires about the nature of the festival. Samita elaborates, explaining that it's an annual celebration her family observes. During the day, Samita runs into Tamira, an old friend who deeply values Indian culture and traditions. Despite their previous closeness, the two have grown apart. Tamira has been acting peculiarly. She's often anxious, arrives late to school, eats alone, and, most strangely, always carries a jar with her. Samita, longing to assimilate with the local culture and be accepted, has started avoiding Tamira, not wanting to be perceived as an outsider. Their teacher, Joyce, notices Tamira's isolation and discusses it with Samita, expressing concern. Samita, however, dismisses her worries, asserting that Tamira can manage on her own and is not a child. Later, while chatting with another friend, Kitty, they notice Tamira walking past. Kitty comments on Tamira's odd appearance and her constant companion, the jar, asking if it's part of Samita's culture. Samita vehemently denies any cultural connection to the jar, eager to distance herself from these peculiarities. The story intensifies at night when Tamira is seen walking home, reciting a mystical spell under her breath. Upon arriving home, she hurriedly retrieves some raw meat from her bag and nervously opens the jar she always carries. With a quick movement, she throws the meat into the jar and firmly shuts the lid. As she turns to sit down, a blood-curdling roar of a demon resonates in the background. When Tamira glances back, she is horrified to see cracks forming on the jar, suggesting the presence of something powerful and possibly malevolent within it. The following day at school, Tamira seeks out Samita. With an air of urgency, she implores Samita to listen and trust her, insisting she needs help. Before Tamira can elaborate, a sinister whispering voice startles her, leaving her visibly shaken and terrified. Samita, concerned, asks what's wrong, noticing Tamira's disturbed and frightened demeanor. In a state of panic, Tamira pleads with Samita to believe her and reveals the jar, claiming it contains something unseen and malevolent. Curious and slightly skeptical, Samita inquires about the jar's origin. Tamira explains that she found it at her house, where the entity inside the jar seemed to call out to her, knowing her name. She felt a strange connection to it and took the jar, thinking she could manage whatever was inside. However, she soon realized the entity's insatiable hunger, as it demands raw meat several times a day. Tamira reveals to Samita that the jar houses a demonic creature, insisting that the childhood tales of demons they heard are real. Samita struggles to believe Tamira's extraordinary claim and dismisses her as insane. In a desperate attempt to prove her point, Tamira throws the jar to the ground in front of Samita. Reacting instinctively, Samita smashes the jar, releasing a cloud of black smoke that spreads across the floor. The sight terrifies Tamira, who runs away in fear. Samita, realizing the gravity of her action, follows her, trying to apologize. However, Tamira, overwhelmed and chanting the mystical spell loudly, sees a demon materializing behind Samita, who remains oblivious to its presence. Tamira is paralyzed with horror. Samita, unsure of how to help, decides to seek assistance, but in a shocking twist, an invisible force suddenly attacks Tamira. Her screams fill the air, and by the time Samita returns with their teacher Joyce, Tamira has mysteriously disappeared. Tamira's sudden disappearance leaves everyone in a state of worry and confusion, adding to the eerie and suspenseful atmosphere of the film. The tension escalates as Joyce, the teacher, informs Samita that Tamira's mother is unaware of her whereabouts. A missing person report has been filed, but there are no leads. This alarming news sends Samita into a state of fear, prompting her to rush home. At home, Samita's family is hosting a religious worship ceremony, attended by many guests. Purna, Samita's mother, announces to the gathering that they will also pray for Tamira's safe return. While everyone joins in prayer, Samita stands apart, feeling disconnected and disinterested in the ritual. During the ceremony, someone brings up a concerning incident involving an officer, sparking Samita's curiosity. She asks her father, Inesh, about it. He recalls meeting the officer, who seemed to be distancing himself from everyone, including his own culture. Inesh also mentions the officer's son, Karan, who was often seen talking to himself, but he's unaware of what happened to him. Feeling unsettled, Samita abruptly leaves the house despite her mother's plea to stay for the worship. At school, she retrieves Tamira's book, which she had dropped earlier. The book, bearing Karan's name, contains bizarre drawings and descriptions of demons. Confused and overwhelmed, Samita closes the book just as she receives a call from her friend Russ. Meeting up with Russ, Samita inquires about Tamira and Karan. Russ leads her to a location where Karan tragically died in a fire a few months earlier. Oddly, the site shows no signs of burning. They also visit Karan's room, where they discover the same symbol from his book. Suddenly, police sirens sound outside, and they hastily leave, accidentally leaving the book behind. That night, Samita experiences a series of horrifying dreams about Tamira. The next morning, still shaken, she tries to talk to Purna, but her mother is upset about Samita's absence from the worship ceremony. A heated conversation ensues about Samita's growing detachment from her culture and the family's decision to move to another country. Frustrated, Samita questions the rationale behind adhering so strictly to their cultural practices in a foreign land, arguing that they should have stayed in their home country if they were so intent on preserving their traditions. The argument escalates, and Samita, feeling misunderstood and angry, leaves the house. The narrative continues with Samita sitting alone on a swing in the garden, lost in thought. Russ finds her there and hands her the book they had previously discovered in Karan's room. He sits beside her on the swing, and Samita begins to share memories of her childhood friendship with Tamira. As she speaks, she hears mysterious voices emanating from inside the house. Intrigued and somewhat drawn by these voices, Samita heads inside to investigate, leaving Russ alone outside. In a sudden and terrifying turn of events, an unseen malevolent force attacks Russ, ending his life in a brutal manner. When Samita returns and discovers the horrific scene, she is overcome with shock and screams in terror, unable to comprehend the unfolding nightmare. The film then reveals Tamira's predicament. Contrary to what everyone believes, she is not missing, but is instead trapped in Karan's house. Despite her desperate attempts to escape, a demonic presence continuously drags her back, holding her captive in a relentless grip of terror. The next day, Samita's father, Inesh, notices her distress and inquires about her well-being. Samita, however, remains silent, choosing not to disclose her terrifying experiences. This silence frustrates Purna, who accuses Samita of running away from everything and refusing to confide in her own family. Overwhelmed by the situation and her parents' misunderstanding, Samita storms out in anger. That night, an emotionally drained Samita experiences a chilling nightmare. She hears noises downstairs and finds her mother, Purna, crying. As she approaches to comfort her, the figure transforms into the demon, now taking on Purna's appearance. The demon lunges at Samita, who narrowly escapes its grasp. She wakes up, heart pounding, realizing it was all a terrifying dream. The following day, a desperate Samita seeks out her teacher Joyce and reveals everything that has been happening to her. She confesses her feelings of alienation, her encounters with the demon, and her belief that the demon is responsible for Russ's death and Tamira's disappearance. Joyce, however, is skeptical, mirroring Samita's initial disbelief of Tamira's story. In a moment of dread, Samita sees the demon looming behind Joyce and flees in fear. Later that night, Joyce contacts Samita with crucial information about the painting and the demon. Joyce reveals that the entity Samita is dealing with is a pishach, a malevolent demon from East India. It is known for its dangerous and evil nature, feeding on raw meat and devouring souls. Traditionally, such a creature is trapped in a jar, a detail that ties back to the jar carried by Tamira. This revelation sheds light on the mysterious and frightening events that have been unfolding, linking them to an ancient and dark supernatural entity. The narrative delves deeper into the lore of the pishach, a malevolent spirit. Traditionally, elders who passed away would become vessels for the pishach, containing it within themselves. However, this method was perilous, leading to the use of jars as safer alternatives for trapping the pishach. The jar that Tamira carried, and which Samita unfortunately broke, was one such vessel. Samita's actions inadvertently freed the pishach, exacerbating an already dangerous situation that Tamira was struggling to manage. In her conversation with Joyce, a fearful Samita realizes the gravity of her mistake. Joyce reassures her, promising to come and help find a solution. Meanwhile, Samita, overwhelmed by fear, seeks comfort from her mother, Purna. She explains the truth about the pishach and inquires about its nature. Purna reveals that the pishach feeds on negative emotions like anger, hatred, and loneliness. It weakens its victim's soul, controls their thoughts, isolates them from loved ones, and ultimately destroys anyone attempting to help them. While examining Quran's book, Samita discovers the significance of the number 7. It symbolizes a 7-day cycle. Realizing that Tamira disappeared 7 days ago, she deduces that the pishach will consume Tamira that night. Determined to save her friend, Samita decides to confront the pishach. Purna, understanding the peril but acknowledging the necessity of action, joins her daughter. Together, they devise a strategy involving traditional Indian rituals, hoping to trap the pishach. In a parallel scenario, Joyce, alone at the school and intending to assist Samita, is brutally attacked and injured by the pishach. Samita and Purna, realizing the urgency, find the magical spell in Quran's book and begin chanting it. The spell momentarily distracts the pishach, causing it to leave Joyce. However, as they are absorbed in their ritual, Inesh returns home. Tragically, he is immediately attacked and injured by the pishach, which then turns its attention to Purna and Samita. Purna courageously chants the spell aloud in an attempt to subdue the pishach, but she too is attacked and injured. The pishach, having wreaked havoc, flees the house, leaving Samita's parents badly wounded. Samita calls for emergency services, assuring her mother that help is on the way. Despite her mother's warnings about the dangers of facing the pishach alone, Samita, driven by the need to save Tamira, rushes to Quran's house. Upon arriving, Samita finds herself in a terrifying encounter with the pishach, which chases her with the intent to kill. In a frantic race for survival, she makes her way to the basement, where she discovers Tamira, trapped and at the mercy of the pishach. In the gripping conclusion of the story, Tamira is found in a dire state, having resigned herself to her grim fate at the hands of the pishach. Samita, determined to save her, attempts to rouse her, but their efforts are interrupted by the terrifying appearance of the pishach itself. Faced with this horrifying entity, Samita bravely starts reciting the magical spell she learned, aiming to trap the pishach back in a jar. However, with only Samita chanting, the spell proves ineffective against the powerful demon, and the pishach lashes out, destroying the jar and leaving them without a means to contain it. In this desperate moment, Tamira, inspired by Samita's courage, regains her own strength and joins in the chanting of the spell. United by their renewed friendship and collective resolve, they weaken the pishach, but they face a critical dilemma. They have the spell, but no jar to trap the demon. Remembering the teachings of her teacher and mother, Samita recalls that ancient people would become vessels for demons themselves, effectively turning into living jars. Making a selfless and courageous decision, Samita offers herself as the new vessel to imprison the pishach. Despite the pishach's resistance, Tamira's continuous chanting of the spell compels the demon to enter Samita, trapping it within her. Samita becomes the new jar, containing the malevolent pishach inside her. A few days later, the film shows a scene where everyone is gathered for a meal. The atmosphere is tense as Samita is forced to consume raw meat, a necessity to satiate the pishach's hunger. Her family is visibly distressed, knowing the constant threat posed by the pishach, which could break free at any moment. In an emotional moment, Samita and Tamira discuss the precarious situation. Tamira, concerned, asks what would happen if the pishach were to escape. Samita reassures her, vowing to prevent such an event. However, as Tamira leaves, Samita's expression shifts, betraying the internal struggle she faces. The pishach, a formidable and malevolent force, feeds off Samita's negative emotions, thoughts, and isolation. This ending leaves the audience pondering the ongoing battle within Samita, as she contains a powerful evil that threatens to emerge, driven by her darkest feelings. The movie concludes on this somber note, highlighting the themes of sacrifice, friendship, and the ongoing struggle against inner demons. Samita's brave decision to contain the pishach within herself underscores the film's exploration of the complexities of good versus evil and the personal cost of battling one's own inner darkness. Did this story spook you out? Let us know in the comments below. For more horror movie recaps, subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in the next one. Fear awaits you.